Hope everyone's doing well. Got a little snack? Okay. So, for those who are just joining the class, we're finishing up this book, The 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader by John C. Maxwell. I don't know if there are any more in the bookstore, but if there are, you can go online and find this book. We are actually going to finish this today prayerfully. Last week we talked about, we did chapters 12 through 15. We talked about passion, having a positive attitude, and we also talked about problem solving, and we concluded last week with our relationship. And if you've been paying any attention to Pastor's messages, I think a lot of that relationship you can glean from that chapter as well. But so today, let's continue with chapter 16. You should have handouts by now. And so chapter 16 begins. Okay, there's still some available. Chapter 16 is entitled Responsibility. Responsibility. It says, if you won't carry the ball, you can't lead the team. Responsibility. And you know, most of these chapters, well, all these chapters start out with a little story. And this one started out with, you remember if you studied world history or American history, talked about the Alamo down in Texas and how it was being attacked by the Mexican army. And for a number of years, the Mexican army was winning. And so there was one particular soldier that was sent 95 miles north to get help. And while he was gone, the Mexican army came and attacked the Alamo again and actually was defeating them. And this soldier that was 95 miles away heard about it. When he got to where he was needed to be to get help, there was no help available. And he heard that the Alamo was about to go down. And so he had a choice to make. Do I stay here and live, or do I take responsibility and go and fight with my brothers? So he went back. Needless to say, they all died. But 2 years later, Texas won its independence from the Mexican army. So this guy was a powerful example of responsibility, because he could have stayed where he was and lived. And you know, that would have been the easy route out, the easy way out. But he took responsibility. I'm a part of this army. I need to go back and fight with them. And he did. But they all lost their lives, but Texas did gain their freedom. So today, let's talk about responsibility. In this day and time, we rarely see people fighting for responsibility. We always see people fighting for their rights. You know, fighting for the right to do this, fighting for the right to do that. But nobody's fighting for the right to maintain responsibility. Okay, so like Pastor said, a sexy title, responsibility is not a sexy thing we want to embrace. But as leaders, it's something we have to embrace. We have to be responsible. You cannot be a good leader and not be responsible. So good leaders always, or they never embrace this victim mentality. Because, you know, when you have people always want to fight for rights and fighting for the right to do this, they maintain this victim mentality. You know, you're just trying to hold me down. You know, I'm the victim here, you know. But when as it relates to responsibility, a good leader doesn't embrace that victim mentality. A good leader has to, they first of all know who they are, and they know where they are because their responsibility, and they embrace that responsibility. So that's a good quality of a good leader, is that they, one, embrace their responsibility. You know, me being the dad of my children, you know, I can't, something about to go down, I can't run and push them forward and tell them handle it. I got to step up because I'm responsible for those. And as leaders, for those who follow you, you're responsible for that. Okay? So good leaders take responsibilities for themselves. They don't pass their responsibility to others, and they face whatever life has to throw them. They face it. Can't get scared and run from everything. Okay? So in your handouts, I think it listed some characteristics of one who embraces responsibility. What's the first one there? They get the job done. A responsible leader goes above and beyond what is necessary. Can you imagine being a good, or can you imagine a leader who just does enough to get by? It's not a quality of a good leader. Bless you. A good leader goes far and goes beyond and above what's expected. They don't just do the minimum. They don't have this, that'll do mentality. They go in and they get the job done at all costs. Okay. So what's the next point? And that ties right in with the first one. You got to go the extra mile. You cannot be an effective leader just maintaining status quo. You cannot be an effective leader just saying, well, that's good enough, that'll do. You got to be the type of person who wants to go beyond, just get it done and go far and above beyond what's necessary. And third, an effective leader is driven by what? Excellence. Driven by excellence. Now, does excellence mean you always get it right? No. But excellence means you try. You strive to get it right. And if you're always striving to get it right, you're going to hit the mark. Okay. And I think there was an example in the book. It talked about, and we may cover this later, but it talked about someone shooting a bow and arrow. When a person is shooting a bow and arrow and they miss the target, do they blame the target? No, it was them. They shot wrong. Okay, so a good leader never passes the buck like that. So a good leader is always driven by excellence. And number 4, a good leader will do what? They will produce regardless of the situation. They finish the job. You finish the job. Okay? So responsible leaders produce. Okay? And just like I said in that example of the archer or bow and arrow or what have you, a good leader always is willing to change and adapt. If I shot my bow, I missed the target, I'm not going to go run down and move the target. I'm going to readjust my stance, my aim. I'm going to adapt for the wind, things of that nature. So you don't blame the target. You look at yourself. So first of all, a responsible leader has to be able to change, adapt, and readjust to situations. Okay, and in that making changes, you aim higher, you aim lower. Like I say, you adjust. So you always look within yourself for the for the fault. What went wrong? What can I do to change this? Okay. Responsible leaders are not those type of leaders that are always passing blame on people. Have you ever seen had a manager or a boss who was always, when something didn't go wrong, they were so ready to blame someone else, but never stepped up to take responsibility? I'm leading this team. And when you're a leader, leading someone or leading the team, the responsibility falls on your shoulders. That's right. That's why when people are these self-proclaimed leaders or what have you, you gotta be willing to take that, shoulder that responsibility, because a lot of times people are so willing to take the title, but they don't want to bear the brunt of being that. Okay. So those 5, you get the job done. These are characteristics of a leader who embraces responsibility. They get the job done. They're willing to go the extra mile, and they're driven by excellence. And what next? They produce regardless, and they're willing to change and adapt to situations. Okay. So how do we improve our responsibility? We know that we've just given those characteristics of a responsible person. So how do we improve on being a responsible leader? First of all, you gotta hang in there, because it's going to get tough. The wind is going to blow, but you got to anchor down and hang in there. Sometimes you may or not be producing because you're giving up too soon. You may not be producing because you're just giving up too soon. Give it a little bit longer. Hang in there. Right. It's just like I heard one person say they never hang up on a person. If they're having a disagreement on the phone with the person, they say they never hang up, because the next thing that person say could be the right thing. So you got to stay in there, hang in there. You know, that's why as leaders, like Pastor said, we don't throw people away. We got to hang in there. Okay? So you also have to admit that when something's not good enough, you can't be a responsible leader and be afraid to tell someone that this is not good enough. You have to do it in love, also do it in patience, but you got to be able to tell a person, you know, I think you can do better. I think we can do better. You know, a responsible leader must be able to address things of that nature. You know, if you're a manager or you're a leader and you have someone who's just not performing, be able to tell them, I think you can do better. I think we can do better. What do I need to do to help you? Okay. So a responsible leader always admits when something's not good enough, and a responsible leader always sets standards high. Because if you don't expect much from people, 9 times out of 10, they won't give you very much. You got to expect from people, okay? And a responsible leader always strives to be better through what? Education, training, or mentorship. There are always avenues a person can become more responsible through education, through training, through mentorship. If you know someone who you deem responsible, learn from them. You know, there's always books you can read. This is one we're going through now. There's always media out there that you can read and learn from, okay? So any questions on that? I know I kind of went through that quickly, but I think it's a very, it's something that we all should be able to grasp pretty easily, being responsible. And being responsible doesn't always mean that you have all the right answers, but you own up to when you don't have the right answers. And like I said, be able to adjust and adapt and change.
Let me share something, Elder. The senior executive staff is going through kind of looking at some challenges in the ministry. At one point, our ministry was drawing about 1,000 visitors a year. Then it got cut in half to 500 visitors a year. And it's probably a little bit lower than that now. I don't know what the numbers were last year, but probably maybe somewhere between 400 to 500. So you notice that the attendance goes down, the number of visitors goes down, and visitors produce members. So, and I remember hearing pastors when I grew up in church, and, you know, I came up in churches that were like 35 members. And actually, the average size of a church across the country is about 35 to 50 members. And what I would hear was, I always heard this passage, 2 Timothy 2. It says, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. And, you know, I would hear this, and it was saying that, well, people just don't want the truth anymore. People don't want to live holy. People don't want to live righteous. And so, and Paul said that this time would come. But, and I always felt that people use that as a justification. Whether it's true or not, let's assume that it is true. Paul didn't end the chapter right there. He said, this is the truth. However, look at the next verse. He says, but. Now, the but always is designed to negate what you just heard. In other words, don't just accept this as reality. You know, I try to do a fellowship group and people won't come. They just don't want to hang out no more. Oh, y'all ain't working with me. Well, I tried to do a Sunday school class and people just don't want to come to Sunday school. I tried to do youth and the kids just don't want. And let's assume that all that's true. And things have changed and people just want to have church for 60 minutes and 90 minutes and y'all had church. I mean, let's assume that all that is true. Paul says, but. Now the but says, he didn't say accept that. He said do something about it. He says, but watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of your ministry. In other words, he said, go do something. Yeah. Don't accept this as reality and say people don't want to come to church. People don't want to fellowship. People don't want to do this. People don't want to do that. Don't accept that. He says here, be an evangelist. Go get them then. Make full proof of your ministry. Use that stuff I've given you. You said I called you. Then do something. You know, and so we as the executives have said, okay, well, what do we do? And when we began to study, I said, well, you know what? We're 17 years later. This is a whole new generation. There are kids graduating that weren't born when we started our church. I got a new millennium, and they think differently. So what I used to win folks back in 2000, well, things are different. So I need to make full proof of my ministry. I need to become an evangelist. I need to, I need to understand social media and the social and society we live in. We can't just sit back and say, people just don't want. No, that's an excuse. And when you was reading that, it just said, well, it just ain't working. No. Jesus wants us to preach the gospel to the truth and advance the kingdom of heaven until he comes. Not until people change their mind. Well, people don't want to be saved no more. We might as well just pack it in. This my foe. We all going to heaven. My foe and no more. We got it. Let's go on with Jesus. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of churches have done. And so you look up and the church that was hopping, now all of a sudden the youth choir, the youngest person in there, 50 years old. That's the youth choir. The senior choir, they 7. They just stopped. And they didn't make full proof of the ministry. So we got, this is our job, saints. Very good. Elder Scott, just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Any comments on responsibility, taking responsibility? If you were able to read the chapter, it's pretty short, but it's really good. Responsibility. Be responsible. Be a responsible leader. So let's move on to chapter 17. Chapter 17 is entitled Security. Security. And it's not talking about the physical security, but it's talking about being secure in yourself. Okay, and it starts out with the example of, again, here, Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of Britain, England. So she became the British Prime Minister, and she was known as the Iron Lady. She worked in a field where it was basically male dominated, but she stood her ground. She was secure in who she was, and so much to the point that she was the Prime Minister for 3 consecutive years, something that no one else had ever done in that society. So as it relates to security, being secure within yourself, let's look at an insecure leader. First of all, an insecure leader is dangerous for several reasons. They're dangerous to themselves, they're dangerous to their followers, and to whatever organization they lead. Okay, because leadership positions will amplify your flaws. So if a person's insecure and they're in a leadership position, it's going to amplify it. It's going to expose it. So an insecure person, here are some of the traits. First of all, they don't provide security to others. Have you ever been in a group where the leader you knew was insecure about their skills, their abilities? It showed. And so they weren't able to provide any security for you or any guidance to you. So first of all, they don't provide security to others because they cannot give you what they don't have. Amen. Can you imagine if Pastor was very insecure within himself and he's trying to lead us and trying to tell us how to be leaders and evangelists, but him being insecure within himself? You can't give what you don't have. That's right. That's right. Okay. And also insecure leaders cannot instill security in others. And also a good leader should be able to make others feel good about themselves. So we're going to contrast the two. An insecure leader can't teach you how to be secure within yourself because they aren't. But a person who's confident within themselves, secure within themselves, they can, they have no problems elevating you or pushing you out there. But you've seen these managers or these leaders who don't want anybody else to outshine them because it shows how weak they are.
Mm.
But if you've got a good leader who's strong and secure, they don't have a problem pushing you and lifting you up. You agree? And also, an insecure person is a taker instead of a giver. And in order to be a good, effective leader, you've got to be a giver. You know, we talked about that in some chapters ago. You got to be able to give of yourself, of your time. And when a person is insecure, they can't do that. They can't give of themselves because they're not secure within themselves. Okay? 3, they limit their best people. I think that's self-explanatory. An insecure leader will limit his or her best people because they can't grow, they can't thrive because of your insecurities. Okay? Because they're threatened by your advancement. They're threatened by the advancements of others. Yes, ma'am.
I've noticed, I've actually experienced, seeing this at work. In the back, in our warehouse, we have older gentlemen there. And all of them have the same condition. They all have hernias. And every time they bring someone in, they try to bring people in, I feel, that will not magnify their insecurities as being lazy, don't do too much. So we had to stand where, I don't know, in different corporations, but in ours, they're speaking of diversity.
Mm-hmm.
So their diversity is to get someone of the same condition. Everyone they've hired have had hernias. So
is that on the application? Do you have
So they just hired real quietly a female because it was a mention of why are there always women being interviewed but never hired. So they brought in a female of the same. So that came about. That's still not diversity. So my long story to this very short point is to hide their insecurities. They bring a person in the same category as themselves.
So this person wouldn't make them look bad, like you said.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's a sign of an insecure leader. You know, they not willing to hire anyone, like you said, that will outshine them. Yes, sir.
You know, I think the last point you made about an insecure leader limiting the organization is a very important one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, in any leadership position, the prevailing thought should be about how do we continue on with the business of what we're doing. In our case, ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything that happens, it should be for the benefit of the ministry.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If everybody was pastor, we have a one-sided ministry because we would be just specific to his thoughts, his views.
Yeah.
That's the good thing about God and what he's done here. He's brought in a bunch of different folks. And while we submit to the authority of our pastor gives us the authority to share some of the thoughts and ideas that God has given us as it relates to building the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point again is if we all thought the same, act the same, walk the same, then how would the ministry reach a different demographic of folks?
Right. That's true. And, you know, the Bible also says that, and if you think about these two verses on the outside, they kind of seem contrasting, but they don't. One verse says, "As a man thinketh, so is he." If you want to be an effective leader, you've got to know, feel secure within yourself, because that insecurity will show. And the other verse also says, and it just said, "As a man thinketh, so is he." Oh, the other verse says that we should think more highly of ourselves than we ought to. Okay, but if you take those two verses, that God has placed something awesome within us, and we should feel secure in that. Now, it's not to say that we think highly of ourselves than we ought to, but it's not to say that we think lower of ourselves than we should. Okay, so like our minister would say, you know, when we have that, when we're secure within ourselves, and as we talked about in the lesson, we should be, that will exude from us, and people will see that. And to be an effective leader, we have to be secure within ourselves. Okay, and that starts where? Within. I mean, because someone can tell you all day long that you're the greatest, but if you don't think you're the greatest, you're never going to perform to that level. Someone can tell you all day long, I think you're wonderful, but if you don't think you're wonderful, you're never going to perform at that level.
Yeah, that reminds me of the LeBron statement when he said he was the best player in the world. And, you know, when I heard him say that, and, you know, I said, well, I ain't mad at him. I'm not mad because that's what he thinks. But then I also looked at Golden State, who their #1 man, Curry, they are believers. His wife is a devout Christian. They are believers. So when I looked at the two, I said, I ain't mad at LeBron. I said, but what is his foundation for what he believes? And then I looked at Curry, who was not pumping himself up, but he was thinking it, because I'm sure if you're a Bible believer, you think you're, but you think you're all that, but you have the right foundation.
Right.
So going back to the scriptures that you say, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. But then it says, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. What's the basis of what you think about yourself as leaders?
Exactly.
So you're trying to tell me Jesus was rooting for Golden State? That's why Cleveland lost.
If you heard, he said we go to church chapel all the time. So I'm just saying, was LeBron praying? I mean,
have you ever heard him reference God?
I'm just looking at what I said.
Good, good.
So,
but let me, but the very good points. Let me add something to that. Speaking about secure versus insecure, a lot of pastors do not have small groups or fellowship groups as we do. And the #1 reason, I mean, you're welcome to structure your church in the way you want to. And some choose not to do that because they have other ways to get the job done. But some literally don't do it because they feel that by giving a person in church the authority over a group of people, that they may take those people and go and start a church. And for whatever reason, I guess I've just never been intimidated by that. You know, actually, I wish I had 20 guys that was trying to build up a group to go start a church. You know, I can't get them to get 2 people. I mean, I wouldn't mind it. I mean, to be honest with you, I wouldn't want them to do it underhandedly, but because at the end of the day, the body of Christ gets benefited. If you're able to get 20, 30, 40 people to follow you, go for it. I mean, #1 is going to benefit the church. And then even if you go start a church, it's going to benefit Jesus Christ. But to say that I'm not going to have fellowship groups because one of these guys may go out and start a church, you know, that to me almost speaks of insecurity. And therefore I'm wondering, are you limiting your church's ability to grow beyond your own personal charisma and ability? And that certainly is not my challenge. My challenge is to get guys to go do it. You know, I want them to go and build a small group with 30, 40, 50 people. But yeah, there's quite a few people, and I think that no matter how big their church are, they are limiting themselves. And I had one preacher say he would never put a preacher in certain roles in his church. He said because it gives him too much authority in the church, and he could always split the church or take people from the church or whatever the case may be. And I just find that to be interesting. I find it to be very interesting, but we shouldn't be that way. Your pastor isn't that way. And it's imperative that each of you that have roles in leadership in your group don't be that way. And if you are insecure, then I think one of the things he's going to talk about next is, well, how to see, the whole point of this book is, if there's something that you're missing, then go figure it out.
Mhm.
You know, instead of me remaining insecure, find out what I'm missing, then go get it. And used to being insecure that you don't have a degree, go get a degree.
That's right.
I ain't gonna hire nobody with a degree because they're gonna make me look bad. Well, you go get a degree then. And then hire people with degrees so the whole organization can look good. Thank you, Elder.
Mhm. So that segues into some of the qualities of a secure leader. First of all, what do we have here? They believe in others. And next of all, they're not afraid to empower others. A good leader who's secure within him or herself is not afraid to empower others. And they don't feel threatened by others as well. And also, they like to bring the best people together. And if you're willing to build up others who may be lacking in other areas, you know, that's a quality of a good leader. Build up someone who's lacking in certain areas. And also, to improve your security, is first of all, you got to know yourself.
That's what I said. Yes.
Know yourself. Nobody know you better than you. You know yourself, and you take time to learn yourself. And there are, you know, there's like all these personality tests out here. You can take those, and it gives you some place to start. But I think for the most part, we without a personality test, I think we all pretty much know ourselves. We know us. And so you can, and also if you have close friends who you feel close enough who will tell you the truth, you know, you got some of these friends won't tell you the truth. You look in a hot mess, and girl, you look good. But still, you got to be able to know yourself. And you know, there are all these tools out here that you can learn things about your personality, and also be able to have someone that you can ask who will be willing to tell you the truth. And next of all, you got to be able to give away credit. A secure leader does not want to take all the credit for him or herself. Be able to give away credit. Okay? And lastly, get some help. If you cannot overcome feelings of insecurity, get help. There's professional help. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to comment. I think one of the other disadvantages of dealing with people with insecurity is that they constantly have to jump through hoops because, like you said, they don't know themselves, so then they don't really know what they need.
Right.
You know, so there's a constant back and forth. I need you to do this, or maybe next week do something else because they're not really sure what it is they need because they don't know who they are. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. Did I see your hand? Oh, okay. Yeah. So thanks. Yeah. So if a person is insecure and you know you don't know how to overcome that, you know there are avenues where you can get help. I mean, we have awesome place here. I mean, I know this is a marriage and family, but you know I think that we can still. First Lady is more than capable of helping us with those issues.
That's the point about knowing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think one is truthful with themselves, not being denied. So many people deny their insecurities, they deny that they have that they're imperfect. So I think they need to be truthful with themselves.
Exactly. Very powerful point. Yes, ma'am. One last comment.
There's a young lady that I work with that is very critical of a lot of things that people do, and I have decided that she was in place she is there to give me whatever feedback or looking at myself that I don't see. If there's something negative that I might be doing, or if there's something negative that someone else may be doing, she kind of at times it seems like she's making a mockery of things.
Wow.
But I have decided, or God and I have decided, that I need her in my life to do whatever it is that she does, so that I can reflect on myself, because we're not the best at judging ourselves, or you know, we're I'm not that good at doing this in front of people. We're not, y'all know that word. It's out there. We're not, I know words out there, but we're not that good at critically looking at ourselves. So those negative things that we may hear from someone, you know, sometimes it will look, maybe there is something flawed about us that we don't quite see or accept.
And a lot of times we really don't. A lot of times we don't want to admit our faults.
Right.
You know, the human side of us, we really don't want to admit our faults. But you know, if we're honest with ourselves, like you're saying, we will see those. And we, for one, you know, the first thing we said to overcome insecurity is what? Know yourself.
Exactly.
Know yourself.
Well, you know, it's
Yeah.
interesting that you and Venetia said that. But let me be real clear. As difficult as it may be for us to admit our faults, we certainly don't want nobody telling us
Right.
our faults. Because, you know, if there's one challenge that we all have, everybody in here, if I tell you something wrong with you, you're going to immediately become defensive.
That's right.
Okay. So that goes back to even understanding the art of how to win and influence people. By the way, another class that we teach here. Because that's a challenge. When you criticize a person, I'm not saying they don't have the fault. I'm just saying that 9 times out of 10, people won't receive their faults from other people. And if you don't believe me, ask anybody that's married. They'll tell you the truth. Okay, so that's a whole different training or teaching. But what Wendell is saying is how important it is for us to do it ourselves and to admit it ourselves. And that's what this class is about. It's about you developing yourself as a leader, you admitting your own faults, you recognizing your own shortcomings. And even in this book, it says, here's what you need to do for you. Because chances are 9 times out of 10, most of us do not like being told about ourselves. And we immediately become resistant. And one of the things that I learned is people will change, but they don't want you to change.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
If I come up with the idea on my own, I'll change in a minute. You know, if I decide I like blonde highlights, I'll put some blonde highlights in a minute. But if somebody came and told me I don't look good with all black hair, you wear black hair just to spite me. You follow what I'm saying? And so that's why, you know, a lot of times it's two things going on. And that is, how do we deal with ourselves, but also being very sensitive in terms of how we deal with others with their faults. Because y'all right, the people that we deal with and are married to and work with and all of that, they are insecure. But you can't tell an insecure person, you just insecure.
Yeah. Right.
You can't tell a boss that you don't know what you're doing. Well, he may not know what he's doing, but you're going to be out of a job, and he still won't know what he's doing. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Scott.
So this leads right into the next chapter, self-discipline. Self-discipline. And the self-discipline says the first person you lead is you. Self-discipline. And I think it's pretty much self-explanatory, so we can go through this quickly because I'm kind of running out of time here. But self-discipline, one can never achieve success without self-discipline, no matter how gifted an individual is, he or she will never achieve success without self-discipline. And I'm sure we all can think of 4 or 5 great leaders who didn't have self-discipline and failed.
Mm.
Gifted, yes.
Yep.
Talented, yes. But self-discipline, not so much. And what happened? They failed. So a person cannot be successful without self-discipline. And so the book talks about how to develop this, and I'm just go through these quickly so we can move on. But the first thing we want to do is develop and follow your priorities. A disciplined person will set priorities and follow those. Develop and follow those priorities. And so you can't do important things only when it's convenient or you're in the right mood. If something's important, you have to have the self-discipline to do it. Yes, sir.
I'm not trying to slow you down, but
That's okay.
when you set your priorities, that don't mean that everybody else kind of understand what your priorities are. So that means you have to make sure they understand what your priorities are.
Right.
Not to say you can't get back with them, but you can't have them pull you out of what you already decided.
Exactly. So a disciplined person set those goals and they'll stay focused, which is one of the chapter or points we'll make later. But you must develop a plan and stick with it. And the next point that the book makes is that you make a disciplined lifestyle your goal. You make this a lifestyle. You know, it's not you can't just be disciplined Monday, then Tuesday through Friday you just let it fall. But you set it as a lifestyle. You set those goals and you maintain and you work that thing. The next point is that you challenge your excuses. You know, there's nothing worse than a leader always coming up with excuses, or an individual that always comes up with excuses. You know, so as it relates to self-discipline, you challenge your excuses. You eliminate any tendency to always make excuses. You know, I'm sure we've all seen people that, you know, they got an excuse for everything. You know, and it kind of wears you down. You don't want to, sometimes as a leader, you really don't want to hear that. But, you know, when it comes, as it relates to us being self-disciplined, you got to get rid of all the excuses, okay? Because I think in one of the chapters we talked about commitment means showing up every day. You know, you show up to practice. You're a basketball player. You show up to practice every practice. You just don't show up game day ready to play. You know, like those players Minister Brooks was talking about. They didn't just show up playoffs. You know, it's commitment.
Right.
And with that commitment comes self-discipline. Okay? And the other thing that the book, I thought was so funny, it talked about these leaders that always want to eat the dessert first. You want to enjoy the rewards first, but you don't want to put in the labor. You don't want to commit to getting the job done. You want to enjoy the rewards first. But no, as self-disciplined leaders, we have to stay in the game and go through the process. We can't just expect to reap the rewards without going through those processes. Okay? And then the last thing is that we want to stay focused. If you focus on the difficulty of the work and not the reward, you may become discouraged. If you're always looking at how difficult a job is, it'll tend to make you want to give up. So as a self-disciplined leader, let's not always look at how hard the job is. Yes, the job may be hard and it may be challenging, but don't get bogged down with that. Look at the big picture. Look at your goals. What are you trying to accomplish? Then we work that thing and we make it work. We make it happen. We just don't give up. Okay? So self-discipline. Any comments concerning that?
It's interesting that you talked about the rewards until the job is done. For those that don't know, our organization has 3 different components, 3, probably multiple income streams, but the primary ones are the church, the daycare, and the after-school summer camp. And so organizational-wide, the ministry was down, so I reduced everybody's pay. And I said, you know, we ain't doing it, you don't get paid. But then I went back and I looked, and I found out that some of them were doing really good. The daycare was gangbusters. They were at capacity. They had a waiting list of 20 people trying to get in. I just said, why am I making them suffer?
Right.
Because the church ain't doing their job. Why am I making the daycare suffer? So I just shifted it. And I was like, all y'all getting a raise. And you're getting a bonus. And you know what? Them was some happy girls. And they was doing the job. So because if what he said was, if you give everybody the same punishment, you will end up with more goof-offs than you will eager beavers. Because they're gonna eventually, they would have said, well, why are we doing all this hard work? And they getting the same. So I said, no, y'all killing me. So I need to pay you all accordingly, reward you accordingly. And y'all over here, get your act together. Because you know what, we gonna have to figure this out. But good point.
Yeah, and that was from author Mike Delaney, and he said that quote. He says, "If any business or industry that pays equal rewards to its goof-offs and its eager beavers," it says, then you will find itself left with more goof-offs than eager beavers. And that's true because. In my profession, I'm a contractor in IEHS, and on our contract, we have people that the only thing that'll get them fired is that they go pee in the corner. And you know what? They beyond short of doing that, they still maintain their position. And so, and it makes the person who works hard figure, well, why am I going to work hard when employee X over here is just barely getting by? I'm just going to barely get by.
That's true.
So, but it requires us to be self-disciplined. I see your hand, but we're called to a higher standard. God has called us to a higher standard. Even though your co-workers can goof off and get along, but we're called to a higher standard.
Yeah, it goes back to your last point. If I'm focusing on my results, if I'm focusing on doing what I was called to do, no matter what anybody else is doing, I'm going to be blessed or rewarded based on what I do.
Right.
And even that situation, it is hard to not see the goof-offs.
Right.
But you got to ask yourself, am I being dealt with according to what I'm doing?
Right. Exactly. So there goes chapter 18, self-discipline. So now let's move along into 19, and I think I've got, a few more minutes?
Yeah, about 5 minutes. I know I took your time, but
that's okay. Well, chapter 19, I think we'll conclude with this because the rest of them are self-explanatory. You can go home and read those, but I just do want to mention chapter 19 real briefly. Talked about servanthood. And in Matthew 20 and verse 25, it says, "But Jesus called unto them and said," Jesus said to them, "Ye know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them." He says, "And they exercise great authority over them." The Gentiles rule over you with a heavy hand. But Jesus said in verse 26, he says, "But it shall not be among you." He says, "But whosoever shall be great among you, let him be your minister. Let him be the servant." Whoever is great among you is called to be a servant. And then in verse 27, he says, "And whosoever shall be chief among you, let him be your servant, even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered to, but to minister unto, and to give life as a ransom for many." So I think this embodies that whole chapter of servitude. You don't want a good leader is not the one who always wants to be served. Because if you're an effective leader, you have the heart of a servant.
Yes.
And a lot of times we think the servants are the ones on the lower end of the totem pole. That's who we always think should be the servants. But sometimes the servants have to be at the top and serve down. To be an effective leader, it's all about servanthood. Okay? Any questions on that? I think you have some on your handout. It lists some other things, but as far as what a true servant or true servant leader does is that they put others ahead of their own agenda. They possess the confidence to serve. And also they empower others to serve, and they're not position conscious, they're not position hungry, and they're willing to serve and serve out of love. Okay? So I'll end right there. And like I said, that chapter 19 was all about being a servant. If we're called to be leaders, we're called to be servants. You know, because chances are, if you're leading any type of organization or any type of group, you've got to get in there and get your hands dirty and get the job done. And it's not all about, you know, those under us serving us. We have to learn to serve those that we lead. Okay? So thank you for your time, your attention. The last two chapters, you guys, I think you have handouts, notes on your handouts, so you can certainly read those. And thank you.